My name is Elias. My story begins not with warmth and sunlight, but with the biting cold of a bitter winter in a gray industrial city. I was the second child, born into a world that already felt too heavy for my family to carry. My father was a good man, a hard worker in the steel mills, but an accident took him when I was only 4 years old. His death broke something vital in our home. It left my mother, Sarah, alone with mountains of debt and 2 hungry mouths to feed, mine and my older sister, Clara. After my father was gone, the lights seemed to vanish from our tiny basement apartment. The walls were always damp, and the air smelled of mildew and boiled cabbage. My mother worked herself to the bone. She washed floors in office buildings until her knees were bruised and her hands were raw and cracked from harsh chemicals. Clara, who was 10, tried to help by sewing buttons onto shirts for pennies apiece. I was too young to work, so my job was to stay quiet and not ask for more food when there was none left in the pot. We learned to live with a constant, dull ache in our stomachs. We wore layers of old clothes to sleep because we couldn't afford heating oil. I remember watching my mother crying silently at the kitchen table late at night, counting coins that never added up to enough. She loved us, I knew that. But poverty is a terrible beast. It eats away at love until only desperation remains. The winter I turned 7 was the hardest. Clara got sick with a terrible cough that wouldn't go away. Medicine was expensive, food was expensive, rent was due. My mother's eyes grew hollow. Dark circles shadowed them, and she stopped speaking almost entirely. There was a strange, frantic energy about her that terrified me. One Tuesday evening, a black car pulled up to our crumbling building. It was sleek and shiny, looking like a spaceship against the dirty snow. My mother dressed me in my best clothes, a woolen sweater that was slightly too small, and trousers patched at the knees. She combed my hair with shaking hands, her breath catching in her throat. "Elias," she whispered, kneeling in front of me and gripping my shoulders tightly. "Listen to me. We have no choice. Clara needs a doctor. We will starve if I don't do this. You are going to a better place, a place with warm food and soft beds." I didn't understand. I thought we were all going. But then she led me outside to the black car. The back window rolled down, revealing a woman with sharp features and hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She wore a fur coat that looked like it cost more than our entire apartment building. Her name, I learned later, was Madame Beatrix. She owned textile factories all over the district. Madame Beatrix looked at me like someone inspecting a piece of fruit at the market, checking for bruises. "He is small," she said coldly. "Does he have stamina? Can he work long hours?" "He is strong. He doesn't complain," my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. Madame Beatrix nodded once, sharp and quick. She reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a thick white envelope. She handed it through the window to my mother. My mother took it, her hands trembling violently. I saw the flash of green money inside. Then the driver opened the door. "Get in, boy," Madame Beatrix commanded. I looked at my mother. Tears were streaming down her face, freezing on her cheeks. "Go, Elias. Please, just go. Forgive me." I got into the car. The door slammed shut with a sound like a prison gate closing. I watched through the back window as my mother collapsed onto the snowy sidewalk, clutching the envelope to her chest. The car drove away, and I didn't see my family again for 20 years. That was the day I learned that everything in this world has a price tag, even a 7-year-old boy. Madame Beatrix was not a mother. She was a master. Her mansion was enormous, filled with cold marble floors and antique furniture that no one was allowed to touch. It was quiet as a tomb. I was not brought there to be a son. I was brought there to be a servant, a living machine that needed minimal maintenance. My life became an endless cycle of labor. I woke up before dawn to polish silver, scrub floors, and iron linens until they were perfectly smooth. Madame Beatrix hated disorder. If she found a single speck of dust on a table, she wouldn't yell. Her silence was worse. She would just look at me with eyes like ice and point at the mistake, making me clean the entire room again from scratch. I was constantly terrified of making an error. She had a cane with a silver handle, and she wasn't afraid to use it if I moved too slowly or dropped something. I learned to be invisible, to move silently, to anticipate her needs before she even spoke them. I ate leftovers in the kitchen with the cook, who was kind but too afraid of the madam to speak to me much. I had a warm bed, yes, and I wasn't starving, but I was hollow inside. The ache of hunger was replaced by the deeper ache of loneliness and betrayal. I hated my mother for trading me for an envelope of cash. 5 years passed in this frozen existence. I turned 12. I was tall for my age, thin but wiry and strong from endless physical work. One sultry afternoon in July, I was in Madame Beatrix's private library, dusting the high shelves on a ladder. It was hot, and I had rolled up the sleeves of my work shirt. I reached too far for a book, lost my balance, and tumbled down, knocking over a small, delicate porcelain vase on a side table. It shattered into a million pieces. The noise brought Madame Beatrix running. She stood in the doorway, staring at the broken ceramic on her Persian rug. Her face went white with fury. She raised her cane, ready to strike me. I flinched, raising my arm to protect my face. Suddenly, she froze. The cane paused in midair. Her eyes were fixed not on my face, but on my left forearm. There, on the inside of my wrist, was a distinct birthmark. It was shaped almost perfectly like a small, brown violin. Madame Beatrix dropped her cane. It clattered loudly on the wooden floor. She took a step toward me, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The ice in her eyes seemed to crack and melt. "Where did you get that mark?" she whispered, her voice sounding strange and choked. "I was born with it, madame," I stammered, terrified by this sudden change in behavior. She grabbed my wrist, pulling it closer to examine the mark. To my shock, I saw a tear roll down her severe powdered cheek. She slowly sat down in a nearby armchair, looking suddenly very old and fragile. "My son," she said softly, talking more to herself than to me. "My Julian. He had the exact same mark in the exact same spot. He loved music. He played the violin." She looked up at me, and for the first time in 5 years, I saw a human being instead of a monster. "He ran away 20 years ago because I was too hard on him. He wanted to be a musician. I wanted him to run the factories. He died in a train accident 2 years later. I never got to say goodbye." The room was totally silent. The powerful Madame Beatrix was crying over a birthmark on her servant boy's arm. From that day on, the yelling stopped. The cane was put away. She didn't officially adopt me, but my role changed completely. She moved me out of the servants' quarters and into a real bedroom, Julian's old room. She hired tutors for me. She taught me how to read financial reports, how to judge the quality of wool and cotton, how to negotiate deals. She was still strict, still demanding, but the cruelty was gone. She poured all her knowledge into me, perhaps trying to make up for the mistakes she made with her own son. I absorbed everything like a sponge. I worked harder than ever, not out of fear, but out of a new feeling, gratitude, mixed with a strange sense of duty. By the time I was 25, Madame Beatrix fell ill. On her deathbed, she held my hand. "You are a good man, Elias," she rasped. "Better than I deserved. Don't make my mistakes. Don't let money freeze your heart." She left me everything: the mansion, the factories, the fortune. I became one of the youngest and wealthiest industrial leaders in the city. But I remembered what it felt like to be cold and small and powerless. I improved conditions in the factories. I built schools for the workers' children. I tried to be the kind of leader Beatrix wished she had been. Yet, despite all the success, there was still a hole in my heart. One freezing evening near Christmas, I was leaving my office tower. My driver opened the door of my luxury sedan. Snow was falling heavily. Across the street, near a subway entrance, I saw a figure huddled on the ground. It was an old beggar woman, wrapped in layers of filthy rags, shaking a paper cup containing a few coins. Most people walked right past her, ignoring her existence. But something about the way she held her shoulders, a certain familiar posture of defeat, made me stop. I told my driver to wait. I walked across the snowy street toward her. I pulled $100 bill from my wallet and dropped it into her cup. She gasped at the sight of the money and looked up to thank me. The streetlights lit up her face. It was lined with deep wrinkles, dirty and thin. Her teeth were bad, and her hair was gray and matted. But I knew those eyes. They were the same eyes that had looked at me through a car window 20 years ago. My world stopped spinning. "Mother?" I whispered. She squinted at me, confused by this well-dressed businessman calling her that. "Sir, do I know you?" Her voice was weak and scratchy. I crouched down in the snow so I was eye level with her. "You had a son," I said, my voice trembling, "and a daughter named Clara. You lived in a basement apartment on Elm Street." Her eyes widened in pure terror. She dropped the cup, spilling the coins into the snow. "Elias," she breathed, barely audible. She began to weep, huge, racking sobs that shook her frail body. She tried to crawl away from me in shame. "No, no, it can't be. Oh, God, what have I done?" "It's me," I said. "I lost you," she cried, covering her face with her dirty hands. "We were starving. Clara got better because of the medicine, but the money ran out so fast. I looked for you later, but Beatrix had moved. I lost my boy." I gently pulled her hands away from her face. I looked deep into her eyes and said the words I had practiced in my head for 1,000 nights. "You didn't lose me, Mother. You sold me." She froze. The truth hung in the cold air between us. "I know," she whispered, defeated. "I am a monster. I hate myself every day for 20 years. Please, just leave me here to die. I don't deserve your look." I stood up. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a hammer. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to throw the years of pain in her face, to get back in my warm car and leave her in the snow just like she left me. That would be justice. But then I remembered Madame Beatrix on her deathbed. "Don't let money freeze your heart." I realized that my mother hadn't acted out of evil. She had acted out of absolute, crushing despair. Poverty had broken her. If I walked away now, the cycle of pain would just continue. I reached down and took her freezing, dirty hand in my gloved one. "Get up," I said firmly. She looked at me in disbelief. "We are going home," I told her. "I have plenty of food now. It's warm. You never have to be cold again." I helped her into my car. My driver was shocked, but said nothing. We drove to my mansion, the house that used to be my prison. It wasn't easy. It took months for her to look me in the eye without crying. We had to have many difficult conversations. She told me Clara had married and moved far away years ago, trying to escape the memories. But slowly, we healed. I used my wealth to find Clara and reunite us, and in the end, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Success isn't about the money in the bank or the factories you own. Real success is having the strength to forgive the unforgivable. It is choosing love when hate is so much easier. My mother broke my heart when I was 7, but by forgiving her, I finally made it whole again.